What's up everybody, my name is Alex Kim. Today, we're going to be talking with Josh Marcus from MKM Law Group, Canada's first esports law firm. Very cool stuff. So he's going to be walking us through how to negotiate an esports contract. Let's get into it. So today we're going to be talking about how to negotiate an esports contract. Yeah. To start, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get your start in law? Where are you guys coming from?
For sure, yeah. So myself and Evan, my business partner, we launched back in October 2018. We launched MKM Law. It's Canada's first law firm that's exclusively dedicated to esports and content creation. We also operate a management agency, which is tied in with Rumble Gaming. And we've been at this for the better part of a year and a half, and it's just been a wild ride.
Fantastic. Okay, so tell me, why should I pay for a lawyer when I could feasibly look at this contract myself and sort of, go through it? So
it's a perfectly valid question. And I'll actually start off, MKM does offer pro bono, so no charge legal services to players, at least with contract reviews. Really the most important thing, as we'll get into, is when you get a contract, have a lawyer, have an agent, have somebody who's familiar with the substance of these contracts look it over, because they'll be able to see things and point out minor changes in wording that will really make a big difference down the line. And that really goes, the case with any contract, but certainly in esports where the industry is so new, and the contracts that at least we're seeing are often just printed off of online or put together from various different sources.
Right.
And it's hard to know what's not there. So getting that second eye on it is always a good idea.
For sure. All right, so stay protected, get a lawyer up. So we want to know how to negotiate an esports contract. Let's start with some key points that would stand out, that would be really important on a contract.
For sure. The first thing that everyone always looks for is the compensation, right? How much money am I going to get?
You guys are getting paid?
And there's various different ways that this can be drafted up, and really that's really where you're going to see the bulk of your negotiation. Obviously, salaries are going to be nice. That's kind of the top level. You want the money coming in monthly.
Okay, so what would be some important parts under compensation? So obviously there's different ways to make money, not just the straight up salary that you make.
Yeah, really sponsorships is a big one. When you get into, especially the larger leagues, where we're talking about the franchise systems, there will be sponsors that the teams themselves can and cannot get. For instance, Overwatch League is signed with Coca-Cola. Those teams cannot go approach Pepsi. Same with their players, they're contractually barred from it.
Right.
So you get into questions of which sponsors can you get for yourself? Can you make any money off of those sponsorships, or do you actually have to give that to the team as part of your contract?
Okay, so regarding sponsorships, what is sort of your typical sponsorship sort of deal look like? Do I get to keep all of that money if I bring a sponsor to the team, or what's the industry standard there?
Generally speaking, if a player is bringing their own sponsor to the team will get a cut of that. Whether that's 80-20, that's a good guideline to use. Sometimes it might be 75%. On the flip side, when a team brings you a deal, don't be surprised if that might not work so much in your favor, right? You might be on the 20% side of that. So it's all about kind of balancing what sponsorships you foresee coming in, and really trying to be realistic about it. It might actually be beneficial for you to rely on the team to bring in your sponsors, in which case, maybe you'll give up a little bit on the sponsors that you bring in to take in a little bit more when they do.
Okay, great. What does the term of a standard sort of contract look like? Am I signing for a year? Am I signing for 5?
I would say a year is fairly standard. In certain leagues, you might see it go until the end of a season, right? If you're on a contenders team, that might end at the end of the contender season, for example. But for the most part, 1 year is very standard. If you are going to be signing anything longer than a year, you should always ensure that you have an opportunity to either renegotiate the contract or an option to terminate it after that 1 year. You never know what is going to happen over the course of the year. You could make it big. You could absolutely crash and burn, right? It's hard to say. So you want to have that protection, but a year is a fairly standard.
So you're on the team and you absolutely hate your contract. You're getting benched. What does this look like? There's benching terms in contracts as well. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it is very common for teams to have almost two classes of players, right? One on a starting roster and one on a substitute roster. And when you're benched or put on that substitute roster, from a team owner's perspective, that makes sense. People go in and out. They want to try different combinations of players. But if you spend too much time on that substitute roster, it becomes a question of, well, are you being compensated fairly for really the time that you're putting in? And that time isn't just the time that you're spending training or playing with your team, but it's also the time that you're not going out there and working for another organization on a starting roster and making money.
Okay, well, that's very good information to have. So let's move on to buyouts. Also a very important part of being on a team. Could you explain a little bit about that? What's important there?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I honestly think that a buyout clause is one of the most useful but misused clauses in a player contract. And it's there for a number of reasons, but ultimately it's there for two. It allows a team to realize some sort of revenue on their investment in you as a player. Okay. And B, it actually can be used by the player as a way of getting out of their contract, right? So the general idea is, let's take 30% as a pretty good return on the team's investment. If they have spent $10,000 on you as a player, it should be worth it for the team to take $13,000 to let you go.
And say
exactly.
Yeah.
And from the player's perspective, they're saying, okay, look, I've been paid some money. Maybe I'm sitting on a substitute roster. Maybe I have this opportunity presented to me by another team. But I don't want to miss out on this chance to go to the next level. It would behoove that player to go and really push that team to pay that buyout contract. Right? 30% is not that ridiculous. Once we start talking about contracts that have, and I don't joke when I say 100 times the player's salary, it makes no sense to have it in there. At that point, you might as well take it out because nobody's going to pay that. So as that player, you might be quick to kind of dismiss the buyout clause as just something that the team owner is throwing in there, but really you can use it to your advantage, because if you can keep that down and keep it to a reasonable number, it'll be a lot easier for another team to come in and say, you know what, it's worth us taking on this risk and putting in that investment to bring that player on.
So as a player, you want a low buyout number, as low as possible.
Exactly.
I think that covers a lot of the sort of important parts of the contract. Let's move on to like tips and tricks. So do you have any tips for anybody looking at like a legal contract that they've been given? Any tricks, anything like that? Any red flags?
For sure. I mean, start off with obviously reading it. Read it with a fine-tooth comb. Don't look at the compensation section and get excited and sign. Right? Make sure that you know what you're agreeing to and have an appreciation for it. And if you don't know, reach out to somebody, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's somebody else in the industry who knows, whether it's another team owner, whether it's your own team asking for clarification. You want to make sure that you know what you're agreeing to. Generally speaking, the teams won't be taking off any taxes.
Where's all your money gone, Daddy?
Taxes.
So you have to make sure that you're setting aside a certain percentage every year. And it is big, and it's going to depend on a number of factors, where you live, where you're working, where you're paying taxes. So you'll definitely want to speak to either an accountant or someone who is familiar with taxation.
How much do you think of your sort of salary would you estimate? Is there a range or something that you could give?
There is a range. No, I'm not going to answer that. I'm not, because it's huge. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Range from 0 to 50%.
Exactly, honestly. Yeah.
Okay,
I put away 30, but who knows, right?
All right, so those were some great tips and tricks. I have one more thing for you. We have here Tfue's contract with Faze Clan. You're familiar with the contract, I assume?
I've read it, yeah.
So yeah, could you tell us your thoughts on the contract? Anything in there that you think is like horribly, unfair or anything like that?
Well, let me say this. There's going to be a lot of talk about what is fair and what isn't fair coming out of court decisions in this contract. And I really hope that it does go to trial and that we can see some of the reasoning and some of the decisions, because it will have a huge impact on esports generally. Let's talk about the choice of forum clause, because that is something that's been in the news recently. Okay. Under the contract, they have signed to the laws of the state of New York as what applies to this. The problem is, part of Tfue's lawsuit is that he alleges that Faze Clan is violating what's called the California Talent Agency Act.
Right.
The choice of form then comes into play, or more appropriately, the choice of law comes into play, where you have the New York courts questioning whether they should be trying a question on California state law. So it became a question of where should this be tried, and the courts a few months ago said, you know what, they upheld that choice of forum clause. They said it should be in New York.
Should be in New York,
And
okay.
it will be held in New York. However,
big news for Tfue?
However, the courts actually just recently came out with a decision that the portion that pertains to the California statute, it actually should be tried with California law in mind.
Oh,
so
okay.
even though it might be actually held in the courts in New York, they will still be applying California law. So that actually is going to be a huge win for Tfue.
Easy dub.
Okay, so
Yeah.
big news for Tfue, that's a good thing.
I mean, it's going to make Faze Clan's argument a lot tougher because now they actually have to respond to these allegations rather than dismissing it based on jurisdiction alone. So that's, I mean, it's obviously it's a very complicated contract and there's going to be a lot of issues to come out of it, but that's one example of how, you know, a small clause in your contract, like the choice of form, could actually make a huge impact down the line where you might not realize it.
Right. Okay, so some of the big sort of points of contention that Tfue had brought up, though, he was saying that he was making a low salary, that they were taking too much, Faze Clan was taking too much of any sponsorship deals and stuff. What are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. I mean, when we actually look at the numbers and how it is drawn out here, what garnered everybody's attention is there is one clause where 80% of, they call it merchandise and apparel, unrelated to Faze Clan merchandise and apparel,
Okay.
that is manufactured with the company. Manufactured in conjunction with consultation with the company. So in other words, if they go out and they reach an agreement with a jersey manufacturer,
Right.
right? And they use Tfue's name on the back.
Right. Tfue
He would
jersey.
be entitled to 20% of that. That is not Tfue going out and finding his own jersey manufacturer and selling it and promoting, you know, the online store. That is the team doing it through their connections.
Right.
So in cases like that, it's easy to see where, you know what, maybe 20% does make sense,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that seems fair to me. Okay,
It
sure.
seems fair. You know, another one featuring that split is brand deals featuring the gamer that exist on gamer or company's content creation platforms if the deal is brought to gamer by company. So this goes back to what I was saying to you earlier. If the company is acting as your agent
Right.
and going out and getting you these sponsorship deals, Faze Clan is saying that they are entitled to 80% of that. That's probably too high.
You think that's too high?
I think
Okay.
that's too high, personal opinion, right? The courts might agree, but again, it's important to think about this as a very limited exception, right? The rest of this is actually either 50-50 or 80-20 in favor of Tfue. So it's not, it's actually not as ridiculous as the media made it seem, at least to me at first.
Right, okay.
But there are certainly questions with that sort of compensation structure that I'd love to see what the court says.
All right, so thank you so much for your time. I know you're a
Anytime.
busy man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we'll see you again.
Absolutely.
I had a great time today speaking with Josh. I learned something. I hope you did too. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.